Okay, good morning. It's Lindsay from
I was the Health Minister for the first 2 years.
News for You live stream. And today we have something a little bit different. We have a guest in the studio, and that is the Honourable Ben Dawkins, the independent member of the Legislative Council here in Western Australia Parliament. So thank you, Ben, for your time and coming into the studios of Freedom Media.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, yeah, it is. And and the reason why you're in here is I reached out to you, Ben, that I see that you have a couple of things going on at the moment in WA Parliament, and one is that you've tabled a motion that you'll be introducing next Tuesday, seeking to have acknowledgement that that the government, the West Australian government's management of COVID-19 has caused an impact to people in WA.
Absolutely. It's really, the idea of that motion is just to get as much, you could say, truth-telling onto Hansard, onto the record. It's very, very broad, and what we're trying to do is get people to even send me their stories, and we'll send you their stories as well. But we want all those things on the table, all the job losses, all the adverse events resulted with, from the vaccine, and we want the government to acknowledge these things. And that's the idea of making the motion fairly benign, because it's pretty hard not to accept that there were adverse effects from the way that the government managed the pandemic. And I'm really mainly interested in the mandates, the job losses, and also the adverse events that resulted from the vaccine, such as my nephew with his pericarditis, which his doctors accept, but obviously the WA Health Department and the government in general don't want to know about adverse events and don't accept them.
It certainly is a very, very big elephant in the room, not only here in Western Australia, but state by state, and then we look at it nationally as well, that these are very much needed conversations that just aren't taking place. So from what I follow WA Parliament quite a lot, you certainly are, one of the first you're the first person to table a motion of this manner. It'll be very interesting to see what unfolds next Tuesday. And a couple of weeks ago, we streamed Andrew Bridgen, and he introduced a similar motion in the UK. And there was a lot of people in the public gallery at the day. So we will talk a little bit more about if people do have stories. You are calling for people to contact your office. We'll put those details out. What we're going to do is, so as we know, Roger Cook on the 9th of August, he delivered his, he did a press conference that he covered a few things, made a few comments. He didn't really have, it was lacklustre what he said in Parliament. He just mentioned that the pandemic inquiry response in Western Australia had concluded, resulting in 34 recommendations. And we'll just have a little bit of a look at some of the things Roger Cook in his press conference talking about that.
I was the Health Minister for the first 2 years of the pandemic, and I witnessed some of those decisions and were part of the people who were negatively impacted by the decisions that we made.
Healthy West Australians are being warned against using face masks to protect themselves against coronavirus.
Please wear a mask. 1, 2.
Unless you have symptoms of COVID-19, don't wear one.
To wear them as a perfectly fit and healthy person in the street is not going to provide you with any greater level of protection. Anti-vaxxers, conspiracy theory rubbish, but we made those decisions for a reason. And I urge everyone to play their part. Get vaccinated, wash your hands regularly, and together we can beat the bugs. Becoming Premier of the state for me was about as likely as becoming Batman. Conspiracy theory rubbish. But actually, to be honest, there was actually a clear pathway for becoming Batman. Can't let the anti-vaxxers infiltrate our community.
So there we go. It's hard not to laugh at that. Roger Cook, as you've just seen, thinks that he's likened to Batman. I guess he's been Robin for many, many years, but there he is. And I guess, Ben, when you hear that as a current sitting member in the West Australian Parliament, you know, he talks about anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theories, and he, of course, said more, but he essentially said the essence of that press conference: the West Australian government has been vindicated with the way that they managed pandemic. What do you think about that?
That report, I've seen that. Obviously, that's just a whitewash. I would say the terms of reference weren't anywhere near broad enough to look into adverse events from the vaccine, that type of thing. It was a whitewash. I think the selection of the panel members was flawed. I mean, we're a very we live in a bubble in WA, and with the mining sector and the way that the government runs, we're not very sophisticated. We don't have many people that, well, I think you guys are doing a good job, but we don't have many people who actually want to talk about the hard questions. And it's sort of, I feel like we are a backwater, because if you look, you know, further around the world, and I know you've been talking to the UK MP, but if you look further around the world, people are asking hard questions. I mean, that report didn't ask any hard questions.
There's certainly, I've seen, and I watched a little bit of Parliament yesterday, and you asked some hard questions on a number of matters, which we're not going to dive into in this stream, but I would certainly like to come back. A couple of weeks ago, you were asking the hard questions around changes to workers' compensation bills and the impact of self-employees or subcontractors, you know, really, really onerous amendments. But this discussion is, as you say, to talk about that elephant in the room. Western Australia, we know, stands for wait a while. You mentioned the terms of reference, and just a couple of notes here, you know, taken from the report. The whitewash report that you've mentioned, when it mentions in the report that the terms of reference excluded the Australian government's response, so although it was managed state by state, it's still the supply of a lot of the vaccines came from the Australian government, but they didn't look at that. They didn't look at local government's roles and their responses, and we've seen in terms of, you mentioned mandates and people locked out of their workplaces, but people were locked out of, you know, community sporting centres, you know, a whole range and raft of local government venues. Then you're looking at non-government organisations, their roles as well. So there's, as you say, you've kept it broad, you're throwing the net quite wide, but you really don't need to. You know, the issues are pretty narrow. We just need somebody to ask the question.
The motion for Parliament next week is worded very broadly. We're asking for acknowledgement of some, that there were some adverse effects from the WA government's COVID management policies, and that they affected some people adversely. So it's almost a statement that you can't deny. So that's why we've done it that way. So yeah, I agree with you. My take on things is, I mean, I see things simply. I'm a lawyer by trade. I mean, the employment law outcomes for people who lost their jobs, and I've seen the police officers and the nurses and people like that. I mean, to me, that's a complete travesty that we could operate in that environment where people are basically coerced into receiving medical treatment. And there's a UN convention on that. I think it's Article 7, and there's also common law that you actually have a right to choose your own medical treatment, not be coerced into it with the threat of losing your job. But so yes, it is, to me, the principles here, like first principles in a legal sense, right? Individual freedoms. I mean, these things are pretty simple for me, but the reason that I've cast it broadly is to get other members of Parliament to talk on the point and get so that they're not going to just shut down the motion. They're going to talk on it because it's a sensible motion.
And I think probably the best way to do that is for those at home that aren't aware of your motion, let's have a look. We've got it ready to go. Three.
Are there any notices of motions? The Honourable Ben Dawkins.
Thank you, President. I give notice at the next sitting of the House. I will move that the Legislative Council acknowledges that some West Australians were adversely affected by some state government COVID-19 policies.
So for those watching at home, I mean, that sounds simple enough, but to get it to that point, how much work and effort, and is there roadblocks within the corridors of Parliament that you can perhaps talk about or may not want to get that motion up?
Well, it remains to be seen what happens on Wednesday, and hopefully we can extract some honesty from the government when they speak to the motion and get them to acknowledge the adverse effects of their COVID policies. I mean, my nephew has the pericarditis and myocarditis, one of those heart conditions, from the vaccine. His doctors have written that down. It's from the vaccine, and he was coerced into getting that because he works in the mining sector. 35-year-old fellow, 4 kids, very fit young bloke up until this point. He's not allowed to exercise. He's not allowed to jog around the block because of his heart condition. So these things are out there, but they're just not acknowledged.
And you mentioned earlier that between now and Tuesday you are calling for those in the public that have similar cases to your nephew, and it seems tragic that it requires a direct link, tangible link, and not in your case, but in other cases. For example, I can think of Dr. Karen Phelps, who's a well-known medical practitioner. She's been a Member of Parliament, Federal Parliament, also a GP herself. She only spoke out because it impacted her and her partner.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for that, it was complete silence. So, as you know, you've seen firsthand, and your nephew's living it, but it affects your whole family circle. People, if they do have, and I guess to add weight to what you're talking about, you'd be looking at if they have some evidence-based, if they have been able to get a declaration around the doctors suspect that it could be related to the vaccine, they can send an email to your staff.
Absolutely.
In the office.
Yeah. Ben.Dawkins at mp.wa.gov.au.
It's as simple as that. We will put the email in the link, and we have got it a little bit later down in as a slide.
But I will say, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
I will say that you're saying it's hard to get recognition for people's plight, unless they're personally affected, and then people start to stand up and take notice if it's your auntie or your nephew or your mother or what have you. But that is the environment we live in WA, unfortunately. Like as a pro bono lawyer, I've run cases to the Supreme Court, not charged my clients any money, and actually paid their court fees. I'm not working as a lawyer at the moment, obviously, but that's in the past. And no one wants to listen, and the whole system basically closes in on you, and everyone closes ranks, and that actually includes the judiciary and the government. Yeah. I mean, it's probably a bit abstract for me to say that, but if you've or people at home have had taken on the big parties in WA, being the big players, anyone in the mining sector, the WA government, you basically have to run it, or the big insurers, for example. You have to run your case the whole way to the Supreme Court, and they basically just will try and make you go broke. Yeah. So that's the environment. So it shouldn't. I mean, it's not really a surprise that COVID is being treated in the same way, with denial, and basically everyone just gets blocked.
And I would say, I'm just going to say for a couple joining the channel that I can see there. So joining us in the studio here in Freedom Media is independent member of the Legislative Council, Ben Dawkins, here in Western Australia. And we're talking about his motion that he will be tabling next Tuesday in the West Australian Parliament. And in addition to that, and we'll have more details about that, Ben is the petitioner. You have somebody that's, you're tabling the petition, but you have somebody that's put together a petition that closes the 24th of January, I believe that is. So hopefully Ben, Rex, that explains who our guest is, Ben.
Yeah. So the petition is separate to the motion. It's related.
Yep.
The petition is the motion, as I said, was very broad. The petition calls for a proper inquiry,
Yep.
not a whitewashed inquiry. And a big part of that is sort of, as you were suggesting before. I mean, Albo's suggested there'll be a national review into COVID. But it doesn't include state responses.
It doesn't.
I mean,
it doesn't.
90% of the responses were, 99% of the responses were state-based responses. So that's a non-review that Albo has announced. It has to be state-based, and it has to be a proper one with the proper terms of reference and a proper panel with some independently minded people, of which there seems to be fewer and fewer in WA. Well, I'm an independent, but we've got one other independent in the Parliament. But yeah, it's a closed shop, WA, when it comes to actually advancing issues that affect people, because you just get shut down.
And it has been a case of the federal passing the buck, because a lot of the things the federal government was saying, well, the mandates were down to state premiers, the lockdowns were down to state premiers. Yep. Nobody really stood up and took ownership over the impact and the significant impact. Your petition, there's three parts of the petition. Those that perhaps if we just have a look now, might bring that up, the e-petition. So just some details there, calling for the WA COVID policy response inquiry that you can see finishes or closes on the 17th of January 2024. And I'm sure, Ben, you would certainly love to get some more signatories onto that petition. You're calling for a review, as you just said, proper terms of reference. If we look at
the closing date is January, but that's really just
January.
Yeah, that's right, but it's just a placeholder. I mean, if people would like to sign the petition now, that's even better.
Yeah.
Parliament only sits in November; it doesn't sit beyond November, so it'd be better to get enough signatures and present that petition before the end of November.
And we'll just have a look and just see if we look at the link to petition. Joanne's just mentioning that now. Joanne, the link is quite a lengthy one. I can tell you, I've tested this many times. Just go to Google, whatever web browser that you have, type in current WA government e-petitions, and it will take you straight to the page. It'll list the number of them there, and then you can look that down. But we will put the link in this stream later, so that the likes of yourself, Joanne, and anybody that's in Western Australia can take it there. When we look at the whitewash review that's already been tabled by the placeholder Premier Roger Cook, there was a total of 900 submissions. Now, I mean, call me a skeptic, Ben, and you may or may not know more. We have to take it, I'm taking on face value that is in fact correct. But my skepticism comes into play that they never published the petitions. Nobody
Submissions.
The submissions. They didn't publish them. Of the 900, 34 were received from business, which is the big end of town. You can imagine what they were saying. The remainder were received by public members of the public. And one thing that the report does say is that they were overwhelmingly criticising the government's response of the lockdowns and the mandates and so on and so forth. Yet when you look at the report essentially vindicates the government in relation to that. So that's an issue.
Yeah, well, it's just dishonest. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, just watch Question Time and you'll see how the government doesn't answer questions. They bury detail, as they've buried this, and they deny the outcomes of what they've done. So I think it's a very dishonest government. It shouldn't be any surprise. I mean, with McGowan, I mean, you know, he probably had some successes in the past, but he would have to be simply the dumbest leader WA has ever had. Anyone that could mandate he's got some sort of a naval law degree or something, right? So he must know the principles about individual freedoms and human rights. He would have studied them, right? But to actually mandate a vaccine when he didn't know it was successful, he effectively told lies that, you know, which turned out to be lies. I mean, I know this is hindsight, but it didn't stop transmission. But his incentive and his motivation was simply to get the vaccine rates up by treading on people's human rights, costing them their jobs. People have an individual right to choose their own medical treatment, and that's what the United Nations Convention says, and common law. And for him to just ride roughshod over that in order to improve his popularity by getting vaccination rates up, and that's all it was. I mean, half the mandates didn't make sense because at one point lawyers like myself, during COVID, were required to be vaccinated to go to court. And I mean, there's no sick elderly people in court, although some of the judges are getting on. But it didn't make any sense. So he extended it just to get the numbers up and make himself look popular. And I know this because I was at the time, as you know, with the Labor Party, and my daughter and I even made campaign calls in Fremantle for the McGowan campaign at the last, or prior to the last election, and we were told on the phone to basically ask for people's support because Mark McGowan would keep them safe. So it was, I mean, the whole last election was just basically hijacked by McGowan politicising COVID. And that's where we are today. And I'm sorry to keep going, but
that's what it's about.
This is a frustration of obviously me being a new parliamentarian, but you don't. It's a bit like when your mum gets sick, or as we were talking about before, no one realises it till you're there. And I'm there now, and I can see how much in denial this government is, and it shouldn't be a surprise because someone like Roger Cook, I mean, he's some sort of a public servant union person who's never had an original thought in his life. I mean, you've seen that.
He thinks he's Batman.
I mean, it's really depressing. I mean, when you consider the smart leaders we've had in the past. Someone mentioned Dr. Jeff Gallup. Smart people that we've had leading the state, and then we've got Roger Cook, some union person from the left wing unions in Perth with like a sort of a public service background, no particular expertise in anything. And so that's what you get. You get no original thought, and you just get denials, and you just get whitewashing. So this is the environment that we're in. It's very frustrating.
And it is. There's in the report, Ben. I've got a couple of dot points here. It talks about saying that staff in MP's electorate office reported that they were telephoned, or that they also telephoned constituents to check if they were well, offer assistance and answer any questions that they had around COVID-19 directions and restrictions. The review heard that this touch point between the electoral officers and the community was highly valued. I mean, in the height of the pandemic, you weren't sitting as an independent in Parliament. But would you have had, or did you know of, or have you heard of that? Have you heard of electoral officers calling people to see if they're okay and if they understand the information that the government's putting them out? Because I know many people that follow this platform never got any such phone calls. In fact, when they contacted the office, they were told put it in writing, and they never heard back from them since. I
don't know. I haven't worked as an electorate officer. I was working as a lawyer and then came into Parliament after, well after COVID. But yeah, when I was campaigning for Labor and in my spare time when I was working as a lawyer, I do know there was there's a lot of outbound calls are made, and I know that it's basically cold calling to generate support for McGowan at the time, and I don't know about those ones because they would have been done by electorate officers. I was a volunteer campaigner, if you like, at the time. But I mean, the sort of calls that we made were, oh, you got your $400 energy bonus, whatever it was, discount that was sent through your Synergy account, and this is from Mark McGowan, and isn't it great that he's helping you get through COVID by giving you $400 off your electricity bill or what have you? And I mean, that's government money. It's not the Labor Party's money. It's not theirs to use to encourage people to vote for them. So I would say that's unethical. And they also, but as I said before, I'll finish there. But as I said before, that people would also, towards the end of the campaign, simply say, are you going to vote for Mark McGowan? I mean, when I say people, me, when I was campaigning for Labor, are you going to vote Mark McGowan? And because he will keep you safe. And I just think that's abhorrent that you politicise COVID and scare people into voting for you.
Well, if you look at that issue, you mentioned the $400 energy payment, the very first one, that if my memory serves me correctly, that was as a result of a payout or a settlement. It stems all the way back to WA Inc. And it was some public fundings that had come forward, and they distributed that out because the West Australian people were on the hook back then for Brian Burke, I think it was.
Yeah.
And
it's the people's money, right?
Yeah, it's the public purse.
So you shouldn't be using it as bait, or I won't use the word bribe, but you shouldn't be using it as an incentive to vote for the incumbent money, because it's the people's money in the first place.
And Ben, the elephant in the room that you talking about adverse reactions, if we look at, we're just going to bring up and push out here the pandemic final report. This is from the report that was tabled. And hopefully you can see that on the screen there. Contained within the report, it's highlighting the occurrences that the most frequent were headaches, feeling lethargic, and some localised pain at the injection site, and a little bit of dizziness. That's actually what the report tabled. You've mentioned your nephew with pericarditis, which is much more serious, and pericarditis can lead to a lifetime of medication, to regulate the symptoms of that. The report mentions it by word only. It doesn't show any of the data. By comparison, if we have a look at the myocarditis, the West Australian Vaccine Safety Security data, the number of cases, the first one on the list, this is from, and something else that you've also been asking questions in Parliament, when you look at that table, these are the more serious adverse events that are occurring from the 2021 Vaccine Surveillance Safety Report. Now, you asked a question just recently in Parliament asking when the 2022 report was going to come out. So you can see, I guess my point is, in the review that Roger Cook has tabled, it's showing headache, dizzy, and a little bit of localised pain in the arm. That's it. You've just seen from the 2021 Vaccine Surveillance Report, it's showing the number of cases. It's not highlighting on the life-threatening long-term and more than just a headache and take a Panadol. There's some real significant numbers there. That what it's also talking about is it's showing, well, I guess since you asked your question, for the last 10 days, I've been following up with the WA Vaccine Surveillance Safety Office, if you like. It's attached to the Perth Children's Hospital. I've been calling them to ask if I could get a timeline of the length of time as to when these reports would come out. The 2021 report takes approximately, there's a lead time of X months after it's produced, so on and so forth, from 2017. I haven't been able to get through to that line. It's a pre-recorded number. It doesn't even give you an option to talk to an operator. It goes on and waffles on for about 20 seconds saying, please treat our staff with respect. We won't tolerate abusive threats. You can't get to talk to anybody about this. So that, I
suspect they're delaying the most recent vaccine safety report. I think it was due in July. Then I asked again, I'm not sure when I asked, probably September, but I think they're saying this month now. I suspect that they won't provide it in November because Parliament's sitting, so they'll wait till Christmas time. Yeah. And they'll announce it when we're all watching the Boxing Day test, Yeah. And sort of try and bury it that way. I mean, I suspect that's it. I mean, that would be consistent with how they operate. I mean, they're belligerent and they don't want to. The more you ask, the more they close ranks and basically block you from asking any more if they can. Yeah, and I think it's important, Ben, you know the question you asked. For those at home, we are going to bring you the exact question that Ben asked. That's clip number 4 on this particular question. Let's have a look.
The Honourable Ben Dawkins.
Thank you, President. My question, without notice of which some has been given, is to the Leader of the Leader of the House representing the Minister for Health. I refer to the West Australian Vaccine Safety System annual report for 2022, and I ask, 1, considering the Minister has previously advised the Parliament that the WAVSS annual report 2022 would be published in September 2023, can the Minister confirm the report has now been published and table it in Parliament? Number 2, if no to 1, why has the report still not been published? 3, will the Minister table the standard operating procedure used by the vaccine safety team to perform data cleansing?
Leader of the House.
Thanks, President. 1, no. 2, the WAVSS Annual Report 2022 is being finalised and currently going through approval processes, which will be completed in November 2023. 3, information on how the data is prepared and analysed is included in the WAVSS Annual Report 2022.
So there we go. You're asking the questions. You're told November. You've just given an outline that you suspect that it won't occur for the reasons Parliament won't be back until early February?
Yeah.
Yeah, early February. And if it's anything, if we look at the Cook government's talking about the repealing the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act, they said that way back in August as well, and they still haven't repealed that particular act. There's very good reasons for them to withhold the 2022 report. And if we have a look at the total adverse reactions from the 2021 report, we're just going to bring that up now. So this is showing there that non-COVID related 1.8 million number of doses issued for 200 adverse reactions report. We might just bring that one just back up again. And then if you're looking for the COVID, the combination of all the COVID, 3.98 million doses, which represents a 5,110% difference. So 10,248 adverse reactions from non-COVID related 200. I mean, you can't ignore numbers like that, yet the government is.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that report has been highlighted around the world and in the UK and so on.
Yeah.
So, on one level, the WA government has done a good job in publishing those at the time. Now we're overdue for the next report. So, I mean, we can't give credit anymore. We actually need them to produce the new report. But at the time, it was quite, and maybe they're but sort of regretting having produced such obviously concerning figures, and maybe the data cleansing will result in this report being not as dramatic.
Which is an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know much about data cleansing. It's a field in itself, but it doesn't sound right.
And to be fair, that information that we brought up there, that actually was from the 2021, the West Australian Vaccine Safety Surveillance Report. That wasn't from the review. They did talk about those numbers. They didn't graph it and put it out as clearly as that. It was in a whole heap of...
I'm with you on that one. I mean, they're quite dramatic numbers. Good on them for producing them at the time, but they haven't subsequently acknowledge them, like you say in the review.
Yeah, in the review, you have to really read it to get the data. In the vaccine surveillance report, it's there tabled, which we've just shown people. So, I think that's that in itself is misleading. A couple of things also it talks about. I mean, they spent millions of dollars talking about particular branding of vaccines. Yet the report, they've gone back to their manufacturing names, so you can't tell which is which. That also makes it harder for the average person that's trying to get their head around what's actually just transpired. What exactly are they talking about? They just don't know because they're disguising actually what the information is.
I agree with you. It's as I said, whitewashing. I didn't get anything out of that report at all. But it's very. I mean, this is where people at home probably understandably sort of see a report like that and they say, well, that's, not everyone at home, but some people just sort of, oh, it's been done, whatever. But it's when you dig down into the detail or lack of.
Yeah, yeah.
That you and then you look at the panel and you look how the panel was chosen and the terms of reference, and you kind of a sophisticated person, of which many of your viewers are, of course. We'll be looking at that and saying, well, you know, what is being hidden here, and so that's where we need to keep up the fight to basically try and make this government transparent. But it's a very hard, frustrating task, as you've seen from like questions in Parliament and the like. It's the most frustrating job I've done, but I'm very fortunate to have this role, and you know, I am trying to make it about democracy for the rest of my term.
It's certainly, as I said yesterday, I watched most of Parliament. There was a couple of matters that were really interesting, and I hope that we can regroup on another stream in relation to that. But you are certainly, well, it seems as though you've got them on the back foot. It'll be very interesting to see how this plays next week. I do want to also just say, coming back to the West Australian vaccine safety surveillance report showing the higher rate, if we look at that particular one there. And what's really looking at these, essentially the bar graphs are just showing the age groups, and you can see the 25 to 29 year age is quite prevalent, and we'll probably just bring that one up again. And yeah, quite prevalent for myocarditis and pericarditis. But what it's actually really looking there, the last line there, it says the TGA has not reported on the national rate of pericarditis. So there's a reason why they're not reporting on the national rate of pericarditis. I mean, that's just another, you know, disguising of the current actually and alarming, you know, occurrence of something like pericarditis.
Yeah, look, I need to probably read more on it, but I do. I mean, even you know, early doors, right? Early in COVID, I think it was the British Medical Journal spoke about pericarditis and myocarditis. I might be conflating those two, but yeah. So I mean, I don't think when it's been acknowledged by the medical profession and my nephew's doctors. So there is obviously consensus on this medically, or not, maybe not consensus, but certainly recognition within parts of the medical community. So surely the government, when it comes to reporting, would be able to report those numbers accurately if it is a recognised adverse event.
Which is, and the journey that people need to go to get it recognised, but we're only seeing information that has got through, that it's completely unavoidable. They have no option but to make that call, because we certainly have been contacted by many people in West Australians that have been to doctor after doctor after doctor. They've had a noticeable change, and the doctors aren't actually wanting to diagnose. And I guess it probably comes back to because APRA have taken the stance that they will, you know, they discouraged or doctors to report adverse reactions.
Yeah.
A lot of people were told it was in your head, you know, so on and so forth. And really,
well, I don't know about all those cases. I mean, with my nephew, his doctors have written down that it is an adverse event from the vaccine, because it did affect that cohort of young men in the 35-year-old sort of range, and recognise that it affected their hearts, or inflammation around the heart.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean with the medical profession. As a lawyer, just an analogy, I suppose, like Lyme's disease, for example, affects a lot of people in Western Australia. But the medical profession, I know this because I've run cases against the...
They say it doesn't exist.
Yeah, they say it doesn't exist. So
from ticks?
It's yes, that's right. So we got plenty of ticks down south, and one of my clients had a job effectively in the bush exploring for mineral sands, and he developed Lyme's disease. But the whole medical community, you could almost say it's a bit like a conspiracy by the medical profession and the insurers to shut that down. And as you say, some doctors are very, very cautious and cagey about actually confirming a diagnosis, because they don't want to create liability for the mining companies and the insurers and the like. And this is part of the frustration that I experienced as a lawyer in this state, and it continues with that sort of the big end of town prevails in this state.
Would it also be fair to say, Ben, that that coming back to your experience as a lawyer as well, but with really the objective that you're seeking to highlight, which the government won't want next week with your motion, for a doctor that perhaps may not have given informed consent, but given the vaccination, now they have a patient that has problem. I mean, it increases culpability if they were to identify that, yes, this is the condition that you now have, and then you go back to the root cause. What is the root cause? If you take away, is it the product that they were given, or the failing of the doctor's Hippocratic oath at the point of taking away a person's medical choice and not giving them that informed consent?
Yeah, not a strength of mine in that particular area, but I would encourage people to definitely take advice on those aspects of well, medical negligence, but also obviously the big pharma, and I'm sure there's cases running around the world, but I'm not fully across that. But I think potentially both fronts, right? The manufacturer, potentially the practitioner. But I suspect it's going to be, and probably already is, a pretty hard task because of the way that governments in general want to shut down these issues and deny them.
It seems to me, Ben, that you're going to need more staff in your office to handle all the response. I mean, even if we look on a federal issue, and you're doing exactly the same thing that a number of federal senators have done. Scott's mentioning it just now that the TGA has been lying in the Senate estimates in Canberra. That's actually happening now in real time. In fact, Senator Gerard Rennick, who we have had on the show, he was tackling APRA yesterday, the body responsible for registration of doctors, about the latest update that Pfizer had given to adverse reactions. We might just have a look at that.
Okay. Mr. Fletcher, how are you? Have you read the latest Pfizer report from October the 13th, where it outlines the risks of the COVID-19 vaccine? I'll read out. So they acknowledge the side effects are severe allergic reactions, non-severe allergic reactions, myocarditis, pericarditis, injection site pain, tiredness, headache, muscle pain, chills and joint pain. They also recommend that the doctor asks any person that wants the vaccine if they have any allergies, myocarditis, have a fever, bleeding disorder, is immunocompromised, is pregnant or breastfeeding, has received another COVID-19 vaccine, or has ever fainted in association with the injection. Now, I note that your letter on the 9th of March 2021 didn't actually necessarily encourage people or doctors at the time to outline all these risks. Are you going to put out another statement where you inform doctors of all the risks as per Pfizer's latest press release?
No.
You're not?
No.
Why not?
That's not our responsibility.
Okay, so let's go about qualifying these risks. I note that the Western Australia Vaccine Safety Surveillance Report, which is one of, as far as I'm aware, is the only state to actually release the 2021 data, has a rate of adverse event per 100,000 doses of 264 per dose versus non-COVID vaccines of 11. So that is a factor of 24 times per dose, and given that you need 2 doses at least to be fully vaccinated, that's a rate of 50 times higher than other non-COVID vaccines. And I'll note that on page 8 that the number of people, the percentage of those people who reported a vaccine injury, 57% of people went to hospital, 48% went to emergency, and 9% stayed in hospital overnight. Now, given that that's a very high adverse event rate, compared to other non-COVID vaccines, is that something that you think you should advise your practitioners to be aware of as well, in order to qualify the risk, which seems to not want to be qualified when we promote the vaccines or talk about the vaccines? And the reason why I'm raising it with Mr Fletcher is that there's a culture of fear among the health practitioners about discussing the risks of COVID vaccine. And I want an assurance from you that this culture of fear is going to end.
Well, again, Senator, what I would say is that any of the expectations that we've set out, and I'll reference again to the March 2021 statement, simply set out what the existing obligations were on practitioners, so no new obligations, to use their professional judgment, to use the best available evidence, including when providing information to patients and the public on social media, but also obviously in terms of their interactions with patients, to help patients make safe and informed choices.
So I guess what we've seen there, when he refers to the March 2021 statement, that's the statement that APRA issued back then that said to doctors, if they don't, if they give it medical exemptions for those that may have qualified for medical exemptions, and if they talk about the adverse risks and so on and so forth, they face not so much deregistration but suspension, because they're sort of in limbo either way. And you've just heard Senator Rennick refer to the West Australian Vaccines Surveillance Report and those numbers that he's talking about, and the 10,200 that we've just seen. As it's seen, from what I see, Ben, you now are the voice in West Australian Parliament advocating for those people from that 2021 report that we know of. That, I mean, you know, do you feel the weight of that? Do you?
Not as yet, but I suppose this is. I only get so many. I only get one motion a year, or what have. So believe it or not,
used it wisely.
So I've used it for this.
Yeah.
Because I do want the truth to come out. I mean, I admire the senator. I have already watched that before. The federal senator that we looked at there.
Yep.
And this is what I'm coming to, is that you know, Canberra. I mean, I'd like to be in Canberra. That'd be pretty cool. Because WA is a backwater by comparison, and it's not that the people. I mean, obviously the people are sophisticated and incredibly well educated in Western Australia in general. Like, we have massive numbers of, you know, high earning, smart professional people. But that's not mirrored in the Parliament, sadly.
Yeah.
So we're not a very sophisticated Parliament. There's well, it's just self-evident, right? I mean, you've just got a huge majority of the government in both houses, and so that leaves a very limited number of people to actually, like that senator was, actually speak the truth and examine or try and hold the government to account on lots of issues. So it's really unsophisticated, like Parliament that we have, and it's worse than it's ever been. I mean, the opposition parties, yeah, they're doing an okay sort of a job. I'm talking about Libs and Nats here, but they don't want to touch this, right? I mean, they don't want to touch this, so it's not,
because they've had opportunity to do this before.
Yeah,
now.
They don't want to touch it because being sort of semi-major, well, you know, bigger parties, Liberal and Nationals, they don't want to. That they feel as though they would tarnish their brand by talking about anything to do with vaccines. So that's where you need independence, and I'm not sure what party that senator was from or whatever.
He's Liberal.
Oh, okay,
yeah. He is Liberal, but
you need independence or really sharp-minded, critical thinkers from the opposition parties, like that fellow, and like Nick Garan in the state parliament.
Yep.
So there is some hope, but it's very limited. I mean, the likes of you know, Libby Mettam, for example, she likes to talk about hospitals and things like that, and health, which are obviously very important, but they're sort of she wouldn't tackle a difficult issue like this. And that's another part of the frustration is that not only is our government very belligerent and very much in denial, but the leaders of the opposition parties tend to avoid actually grasping the nettle and actually going forth with difficult issues.
Yeah,
I will tell you just quickly though, because I think you saw my my maiden or my inaugural speech.
I did.
We're not allowed to call it maiden speech apparently.
Yeah.
Political correctness. So I have to keep on correcting myself. Inaugural speech. But anyway, just quickly on that, because I did mention COVID in there, just in part. I mean, I mentioned my nephew and the vaccine, and the pericarditis or myocarditis, and walked into the members' bar a few days later in Parliament, and one of the backbencher puppets in Labor, who I knew, was fairly friendly with before, and I'm not looking for any sympathy in this. I'm just saying this is a funny anecdote. Walked into the members' bar. And it's quite gentrified in there, you know, like Chesterfield chairs and, you know, wood panelling and stuff like that. And he yells out...
Smoking jackets and...
Yeah, he yells out from the other side of the members' bar in Parliament and called me a dick because I was carrying on with anti-vax stuff. I mean, this is the mentality of particularly Labor backbenchers whose job it is to try and shut down independent thinkers in the Parliament. And, you know, swearing or abusing me in the members' bar.
Unparliamentary.
But it wasn't in the chamber. It was in the in the members' bar. And it doesn't worry me at all that he swore. But I just think it's funny that this is the mentality of this government, and you know, some people that are in denial in WA, that you mention things in good faith, the adverse events that are associated with the vaccine and so on. And I only mentioned them in a fairly small way in my inaugural speech, but the mentality is to actually come up to you and call you a dick and an anti-vaxxer. I mean, this term anti-vaxxer is just that it's used as a blanket to try and demonise anyone who wants to examine real adverse events from the vaccine, and that's not anti-vaxxer. That's just common sense that someone wants to have the dangers exposed so that we can do something for the people that are affected and a better job next time. That's not being anti-vaxxer, that's just being pro-health.
And we've certainly seen at one of the packages that we've played for those that have just joined the stream now, we've seen Roger Cook on the 9th of August, when he's talking about delivering the review, he's received it and he's going to table it out in Parliament, and he uses exactly that term, conspiracy theory anti-vaxxers. So
such a dumb way of treating citizens who have concerns. Well, it's a nasty thing to just try and demonise everyone, and as I say, that's how we roll here.
Well, on the flip side, Ben, have you had any support whispers in the corridor since you've been tabling this motion? And
well, you will never get anyone within the Labor Party, and what do they have? Something like 70 odd out of 90 odd positions in between the two houses. So you'll never get them to basically say anything, you know, at all. They're prohibited. It's like without, you know, over dramatising it, but it's like the Chinese Communist Party or the Politburo, you know, in Russia. It's basically they have discipline, so they won't ever. They could have thousands of people come to them in their electorates with problems, but you can guarantee none of them will raise that on problems from the vaccine, for example. None of them would raise that because it's against the party leaders' position, and the party leaders are in denial and trying to shut down this issue. So that's not democracy, but that's because that's a disadvantage of having so many people from the same party and the government party in Parliament. But yeah, no. Back to your question, a couple of people, you know, like in the minor parties and the independents have expressed a willingness to speak about it. Yeah.
Are you expecting, because this, if I go back again to Andrew Bridgen from the UK Parliament, the chamber was pretty much empty. but the public gallery was full. And
Yeah.
although you couldn't see them, you could certainly hear them.
Yeah.
Once they kept him waiting,
Yeah.
had it at the last, I came in to stream that, and I thought it was going to I was sitting here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but he didn't come on till about, I think it was 10:15 at night.
Yeah.
Do you think, is it such probably early days for people that have contacted your office? Do you think it's got to the point that we will see people in the public gallery next week?
I'm not sure. Like I say, I've been in Parliament 6 months, and I knew the COVID response from the WA government was a big issue for democracy, and also for people's job losses and adverse events from the vaccine. But I hadn't actually put it on my agenda as such, other than asking some questions. Because as an independent, I don't really have I don't get to have an agenda. I only get this one motion per year.
Yeah.
So, I don't know what numbers will be there in the public gallery. Hopefully there will be some. But what I would I expect there will be a full house of MPs in there. I don't think it'll be a walkout like that one. For one thing, the Labor government, they have to defeat the motion, well, probably, most likely, although it's pretty hard to defeat when it's so broad and so general, but they have to be there so that they've got the numbers to defeat us on the crossbench and opposition, so I don't think there'll be a walkout. That must have been a different sort of procedure that Brigden was involved in.
Yeah, very similar,
Yeah.
but I guess there would have been eight or nine MPs in Parliament when they have a chamber in the House of Commons of 650.
Yeah, but my one will be voted on.
Yeah.
So they'll have to be there. Otherwise, they'll face it being voted up.
And that's Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah. So be voted on Tuesday for the debate on Wednesday. Is it
The debate Wednesday.
The debate's Wednesday.
Yeah.
So
And the vote.
And the vote.
Yeah.
So again, as I've mentioned, you can go on to, and we will put the link. I think I saw somebody put that link in the comments as well, so thank you for that. It may not pop up because it needs to come up from our end first. But yeah, you can go on to, thanks Ali, you can go on to Ben Dawkins' page to actually see the motion, or you can go onto the WA Parliament for e-petitions. We've seen just recently Nick Goren tabled a petition over 11,000. We had the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act had over 30,000. It's certainly from the issue that has impacted on a number of people in Western Australia. You'd have to, sort of be expecting north of, of 10,000 signatories, I would have thought.
That would be fantastic. I mean, I'm not really, a numbers man or in that sense. I'm obviously interested in people's stories, the human aspect of it. Well, there's economic aspect of it. There's health aspects of it. In an ideal world, having a petition with a big numbers is one thing. But actually, I'd love to think that actually the bigger those numbers are on the petition, that we could actually generate a real inquiry.
Which is what you're calling from.
Yeah, like an open and transparent and precise and detailed inquiry.
Yep.
Which we haven't had, and that would give me some satisfaction if I did that. But that's what you dream about as an independent, is actually getting something real done, and through that inquiry, some of the people that have been adversely affected may obtain some redress eventually, compensation, what have you. That would be an ideal outcome for me. I'm not doing this for popularity. I suppose it's actually, I've been called a dick for even mentioning it, so by one of the Labor backbench puppets. But I mean, it's not something you venture into for popularity. It's something you do because you see an unmet need.
And is it, well, it would be early days to turn your mind to the sort of the terms of reference or the appropriate terms of reference that should have been in place for the first review. But if you were to have an independent review, the things of like making public submissions viewable, readable, actually put them on a website so people can actually see, perhaps a lot more transparency around those that are giving evidence or called in to tell particular stories. You've mentioned truth telling. Would you like to sort of see that it would get to that point where people, because they need to tell their stories and it needs to be heard, that they do get told, apart from yourself next week, but in person on the Hansard?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I'll get a fair bit of time to speak on this one, and I'll try and get as many stories onto Hansard in that time that I can. The benefit is to have, and some people, people aren't necessarily willing to share, medical records or anything like that. But obviously, the more that I have, that's like with my nephew, for example, where the doctors involved have actually admitted it was a vaccine-related reaction or adverse event. Obviously, I want to be on solid ground. I mean, I'm sure I will be, but the more substantiation, if you like, for people's claims, the better. And yeah, if I get those on Hansard, then that's moving somewhere forward. But there are people that will also speak on them. So I can, if there's too many stories for me, I can give the other stories to, most likely, I haven't asked him yet, but Dr. Brian Walker and people like this, who's also in the Parliament. Yep.
Yeah, can I just ask, Ben, and my apologies that I don't have it down here, can I just get you to go with your email address again to email your stories?
So it's ben.dawkins, like Jennifer Hawkins, but with a D, and at mp.wa.gov.au. And, well, I've got a website as well, which is ben.dawkins.com.au. Sorry, not Ben.Dawkins, bendawkins.com.au.
bendawkins.com.au, that's where you can go. So those watching the stream, so that's why you've agreed to come in and do this live, so that we can get this stream out now. Yeah. Not that there's anything that you don't want to say, because you've said from the outset, I can ask whatever questions I like. Yeah. But to get this story out, we want to get this circulating. As we always do, we ask that people like, but more importantly, share this stream. Because one of the hurdles that you don't have the West Australian at your disposal, who are very much on side with the WA Labor government, for you to be able to get out and awareness, public awareness, that's going to be.
Well, when I said that the WA is very unsophisticated and controlled by the big end of town and the big players, I mean the West Australian newspaper, the mining industry, the WA government, part of those big players, and trying to get anything done through those bodies is like shouting into a wind tunnel. And hopefully that dynamic will change one day. That's why I was very happy to be here, because I'm interested in free speech and democracy, and that seems to be what you're about. So we need more of it. But I mean, on that point with the vaccines and the West Australian newspaper, I was told by, let's say, a media advisor who works in the political sphere, initially not even to mention the COVID in any way in my inaugural speech, because he told me that Anthony Segalia, I think it is, the editor of the West, doesn't want any stories, and the West will never do any of these kinds of stories about adverse effects of any COVID response policy of the WA government, because, and I don't know, you might be able to verify this or not, but from a marketing perspective, the West Australian newspaper has decided that they want to appeal to, shall we say, like, I think mums in the outer suburbs who were told that Mark McGowan was going to save their children's lives, basically. So, and that's who the West Australian is appealing to. So, if that's their audience, they don't want to say anything negative about it, because their target audience has been made to believe that Mark McGowan saved their lives.
And that still is a hurdle to get over, but it's an interesting position to take because legacy mouthpiece mainstream media, you know, their numbers on many platforms have pulled back, and because people have heard the constant 24/7, minute by minute press conferences talking about everything sundry. Yet when it comes to this, and it's unavoidable, and people are going places and hearing these stories. I mean, I went to a presentation about 3 weeks ago, and somebody just asked, and it wasn't related to the pandemic or anything like that, but they just asked the question, can I just ask, can you stand up if you have or know of somebody who's had a reaction to this? And 90-odd% of the room stood up, and it was just, you know, at that point you kind of realise the gravity of you know, the lid that they're trying to keep on this. So you've well and truly pulled the Band-Aid off. It's not going to be pretty, as you say. And if Dick is the least or the worst of what you're called in this in the corridors of WA Parliament, then I'm sure that you would take that as a badge of honour, because you are trying to you know, get this acknowledgement, which I think is absolutely fantastic, and hopefully those watching this stream can see exactly how you've used your one motion. Can I just ask Ben, could you just explain that? Can you just explain that people may not be aware of the quota system in terms of, you know?
Yeah, they calculate it based on the numbers in each party. So on the motion side, obviously, me being an independent, not a party, yeah, I just get one per year basically. I mean, Labor Party gets numerous, I don't know, a dozen or something. I'm not sure. I've got the schedule in the office, but yeah, like I think the Cannabis Party gets 2 and the Greens get 1 or what have you. So it's that sort of a regime.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I'm able to, you know, advance many issues, but yeah, like you say, I've chosen this one, and I'm getting. I mean, I'm no absolute expert. I understand the legal principles involved, and I've seen the evidence that we've seen today, and like you know, from other people that've been affected. But I'm encouraged that by the way that this has gone today, that you know, that maybe I'll just have to work a bit harder over the weekend and all that, and you know, Monday and Tuesday, and make sure that I actually get as much traction and cut through using hard data and real stories. And so no, I'm getting more encouraged now that I'm talking to you about this, that you know, it was the right motion to go ahead with.
That's pleasing to hear, and I guess so we have been going for over an hour. Thank you again, Ben, for your time, and I'll usually just sort of throw it out for those, just give them 5 minutes to perhaps, if you have a question that you might want put to, are you happy with that? If we get an audience question, we'll just give it sort of 5 minutes, and we'll just talk about a couple of other things. I guess any question apart from Nobby, I can see you there watching from the UK. The challenge, Nobby, was certainly not accepted. We gave you an opportunity. I don't want to use this stream to talk about that so much, but fair to say that somebody has kindly donated the funds to enable us to have that debate with you and Dr. Mark Lofts, and on his return from the East Coast, that will be occurring, Nobby. The challenge is back to you to come on stream and have the debate with Dr. Mark Lofts. But any questions that coming through, again, independent member of the Legislative Council here in Perth, Western Australia, the Honourable Ben Dawkins. So Scott's coming in with a question here, just saying, well, asking if there was a creditable alternative to the status quo, Liberal and Labor. I know that you've got an answer to this. You might not want to reveal this just yet. You know, could these two parties work together to destroy that alternate option? That's Scott's question.
Which two parties?
Liberal and Labor.
No, I mean, there's a party that I know is out there at the moment, and it's trying to get enough numbers. They need to get 500 members, which seems ridiculous that they haven't got them because it costs $0 to join. I can send people that.
And if we're letting the cat out of the bag, that's fine. But
no, I'm not really. I'm just saying I can find a way of advising people who that is and directing them towards that campaign, because it is a party that is in the centre, and I would like to I think 100% that party needs to be registered, because exactly as, what was the caller's name?
Scott.
Scott, yep. Exactly as he's saying, we don't have a credible, there isn't a credible alternative to the two major parties at the moment. I mean, I'm no offence to the Greens, but the Greens exist on a different in a different sphere. Very little of what they propose is practical. As much as I want to see the planet saved and so on, but someone in the fair-minded and in the centre and level-headed, a party, and it does exist, but it just needs to be re-registered. Something like that. That is going to happen. It's already shown from the results in the Rockingham by-election, which is the most recent thing we have to go on, is that people are moving away from the major parties towards you might say, centrist independence, but effectively almost a party of independents in the centre, democratically focused, is what we need, and people should really think about that in the next election, because we need to break this two-party model. It's just a bloody absolute disgrace, and it's, as I say, it's just so unsophisticated, like this red team, blue team rubbish, you know. Like you say, it creates, it doesn't create independent or critical thinking. It creates basically the two major parties playing the small target, neither of them tackling the big issues like this vaccine issue, because neither party wants to make a mistake. So therefore, the thing is to do nothing and just hope that they get voted on because they're not the other team. So it's just the most brain-dead political environment imaginable. I mean, the federal Senate seems to be a bit more sophisticated because, you know, I suppose the Greens have a balance of power. It appears in the Senate. There.
Oh, it's still hard work, and you know, a lot of questions taken on notice. Excuse me. So, but hopefully, Scott, that gives you some insight that proves that we are live. Nothing is staged or scripted, and that is Ben's answer. Can I just ask Luke if you can just bring back? I will come back to Luke, your question, but Patricia, just want to so a little bit further. Yep, there we go. So Patricia is saying, Ben, for your well done on finally trying to get some decency in elected members in the WA Parliament. And Patricia gives you your blessing. So thank you, Patricia, for that.
If you, it's like they say, tell me what you really think. If you if you look at my LinkedIn, I did have a proposal of eradicating 25 members of the West Australian Parliament from, or 20, let's just say 25 seats.
Wow.
And I copped a lot of flack, obviously, from the major parties in the Parliament for that. They introduced my LinkedIn social media. But as I said on that post, if you look it up on LinkedIn, I see myself as a spy for the taxpayer, effectively, or a whistleblower for the taxpayer, because there is so much wastage with all these MPs who do nothing because they're told to do nothing by their parties and not to speak out on any issue. So it's like it's the opposite of democracy. It's just.
And you mentioned wastage and something that was in the report tabled by this so-called independent pandemic review. And I have got your question in my mind, Luke. I am going to bring that up. Actually, I'll cover this now. So for Luke that's just joined, he's asking just to say the two things that you're asking for. Number one is if anybody has any personal stories that you can contact Ben Dawkins, independent member of the Legislative Council, and email his staff because he wants to get these truth stories out in his motion and for the debate that will occur next week. The motion will be tabled Tuesday, the debate will occur on Wednesday in West Australian Parliament, and get some of these truth story and telling on the Hansard, which is what you're wanting to do. Your petition has three particular layers to that. One is the acknowledgement, which is your emotion that there has been people impacted by the policies over the last couple of years relating to the pandemic. But more importantly, you're pushing for a review of the a proper review with proper terms of reference, independence, transparency, because there's a lot that really needs to be learnt.
Well, with the review, I mean, this is a timing thing, right? Albo's announced his review, which doesn't look at state responses, right? So that's a non-review because most of the responses to COVID were state-based. So you could say there's a sort of a conspiracy between Albo and Roger Cook. Neither one actually doing the right thing, and neither one doing a proper report. So I mean, those guys do. Yeah. Let's not call it a conspiracy, but let's just say they back up their mates, right? So I mean, Cook can say, oh, there's a federal one. But the federal one review doesn't look at the state responses. So this is why it would make sense, like logically, that if the federal one's being done, but it doesn't look at state responses, well, let's now do one that does look properly. At state responses. So frustrating, but.
Yeah, but if you also look at, I mean, you wouldn't say he's not on tape as definitively saying he's going to have a Royal Commission into the pandemic response. This is Anthony Albanese.
Oh, yeah.
But he's as close to and very strongly politically inferred that it must be something of the likes of a Royal Commission. Now, politically speaking, you wouldn't use those type of words if the object is a Royal Commission. So, and he's come under scrutiny over that. We've seen Senator Malcolm Roberts has tabled a motion which has got up. It's going off to the Parliamentary Legal Committee to define a terms of reference, if it was to be a Royal Commission, what those terms of reference would be. Now, surprisingly, the Greens supported that. Labor didn't, and the crossbench and the Greens, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, in federal parliament got that motion up. Is that a step in the right direction? Absolutely. Does it mean there will be a Royal Commission? No, but in the absence, it has to be more than what we've currently had. There's no doubt about that. And you would also talk about that, they're saying, well, probably similar to the mis and disinformation bill as well, that that there was a number of submissions and they haven't been published. People don't know, that they've only published 1,265 of them, but we now know that there was over 23,000 submissions in relation to that bill. None of the West Australian submissions were published. But they did name the 39 submissions received from the particular organisations, predominantly the big end of town. I haven't seen any more questions come through. I'm just, thanks, Clayton. Scott's appreciates the information and says that he certainly welcomes the fresh ideas that you're bringing into West Australian Parliament. So thank you very much there. Oh, there's a question there about National Cabinet. I mean, that is, from a legal viewpoint, I mean, constitutionally, the National Cabinet is not something that's actually recognised, yet Mark McGowan, went to National Cabinet. All the state premiers went to National Cabinet. What's your views on that?
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that, to be honest. I mean, the National Cabinet seemed like a bit of a weird thing. I'm not sure what you think, that it was maybe too much of a sort of concentration of power, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one way of looking at it, but if we have a state premier, Mark McGowan, then go to National Cabinet, should the information and the decisions that they've subsequently made based on the information at National Cabinet, should some of that be disclosed to the West Australian public?
Yeah, so that's not going to be something that Albo's agreed to do then, by the sound of it. Is it? No. Who's interviewing?
He's on the he's on the fence there.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just trying to pick up another question that was coming through. He certainly, there was a lot said around the time. I think then ex-Senator, Federal Senator Rex Patrick actually took a case all the way to the High Court, and the High Court ruled that National Cabinet is not a thing per se. It's not,
that may well be the case. Yeah, I'm sadly, rightly or wrongly, I'm probably too focused on the state. I'm just, dealing with what's in front of me. I haven't. Yeah. It's sort of bizarre, I suppose, but when you're working in the state parliament, you don't follow everything that happens in the federal. And
rightly so, because you're flat out trying to keep up with everything that's...
A little bit, like it's trying to schedule, not miss deadlines, and get things, like with the legislation that was before the House yesterday and stuff.
And Rocco's mentioning, as I was mentioning, Rex Patrick, he was talking, he's putting that comment up there, as I say. What he is saying then is, the redaction of information on FOIs. And I guess in West Australian Parliament, I believe it's a Section 80 notice where the government can use that particular notice to not answer questions. Is that right?
Again, not too sure. What, Section 80 of the FOI Act, or?
Well, Section 80 of the Parliamentary Regulatory Act, and as I understand, no Premier has used that particular notice. I did a stream on this about 6 or 7 months ago, that Mark McGowan had used it something like 74 times, and the last two Labor governments hadn't done half of that in 6 years. I
don't know. I'm coming in a sense quite late to this issue because I wasn't involved during COVID or anything like that. I was just at the time, I got my 2 jabs or 3 jabs, and just sort of cracked on with whatever I was doing at the time with my law work or what have you. Working from home mainly, but so I haven't really, as a lawyer or anything, looked into some of these things that you're talking about. But it is bizarre that, I don't know if you found anyone, but is there anyone up and down the terrace that's actually, like, as in barristers, that are going hard on any of this stuff? Because
no, there's nobody going hard on any of this, and that's the problem.
And I feel that's the barristers up and down the terrace are pretty some rippers there, but they're also a bit again, I'll use the word unsophisticated. Well, our legal community is unsophisticated in Perth because they're all taking the king's shilling. Basically, they're either working for the WA government or the mining companies, and so they don't want to venture outside of those parameters of working of agitating. So you probably need to go to the East Coast, but probably to the to London to get someone who's actually prepared to take on the system.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned earlier the lawyer that was talking. Mentioned Julian Gillespie, who is taking on and part of a class action. I think Dr. Mel McCann, he's involved somewhere there. One of the first class actions in Australia. To look at that, but certainly nobody here. I did in the very early stages, and I mean no disrespect in doing this, or in saying this, but I did reach out to Tom Percy, and because he was incredibly vocal around the laws with the outlaw motorcycle gangs and the infringements on human rights and things like that. So I thought he might have something to say in that sort of,
I think it's a step too hard. Tom's good with things where there's police, and police being given excessive powers, and he's good at speaking out like that. So he's obviously on board with individual freedoms and excessive powers for the authorities. But probably vaccine, that would probably, or any of the COVID policy responses would, he's probably like you know, even like the Liberal Party to a degree, he's probably scared of being called an anti-vaxxer or something. So I suppose to that extent it's a culture of fear for everyone about having their name associated with any sort of proper inquiry. Or
yeah. And I will say, to be fair, he did respond,
Yeah.
and we had a conversation, which is, I think, rare for an independent platform like this. But I think it was more a scheduling. He was in the middle of a particular, you know, a trial, and that trial I think was 2 months, scheduled for 2 months. So I can understand.
Yeah, but has he ever spoken about vaccines?
Not that I've heard. So that, yeah, so just, I mean, Loaded's just asking a question, so what do we see about censoring the speech of fellow Australians? I'm not sure whether you're implying that it's perhaps this platform does. We don't censor any comments apart from anything that is a very obvious threat, because it's just, you know, just zero tolerance in relation to that. You know, I don't care, you've been called a dick in Parliament. I don't care walking out the street. If I'm called a dick, it phases me not.
Yeah.
So, you know, if somebody wants to try and do something and think you can do it bigger and better, well, then they can go out and do that.
Yeah.
But we don't censor any comments on this platform. People can say whatever they like. We do stop links because it's been, at the height of COVID, we had a lot of the Nigerian spammers, and there's a lot of vulnerable people out there that I just didn't want them to click on a link that takes them to crypto trading, and you know, so that's why we cut down links. So yeah, Loaded, if you think that's the case, then so be it. Your comments are coming up here, so I don't see how you feel that you're censored. Ben, can I ask you?
It's a bit like being on telethon, actually, isn't it? Like
yeah,
reading stuff off. Like,
yeah, except there's not donations coming in. It's you know, yeah. So the what
always
would be?
wanted to telethon.
Sorry.
Always wanted to do telethon.
Oh yeah, well it's it was just on in Perth. I mean, it's a fantastic record to get that. I'm sure we've reached out a couple of times to Basil Zemplis, but he he wasn't wasn't responding, and hasn't responded for.
Well, Basil lit up Council House in blue and white. You know, so
for support of Israel.
Yeah, which I thought was a little bit, what you might say, sort of provocative.
That and he also lit up Council House in the rainbow pride colours when we were tackling the story of Drag Queen Story Time at the City of Perth Library, which is a stream that had over 100,000 odd views on that particular one, but quite an interesting, you know, that's off topic there. Ben, in closing, if you had a further message, you know, is there anything that you would want to say? That because
just put your big boy pants on and get serious. Like, just don't vote like a donkey to people that aren't doing anything. You know, I'm not talking about me. I don't really care, but just don't vote for Labor, and make sure that you get a parliament that's a representative of the people on the ground. The Labor government's not representative. None of those people actually went through a ballot of, as far as I know, of the Labor membership to even get there. They were just put there by the unions, and particularly the left faction union. So it's totally unrepresentative. None of them, well, a couple of good ones. There's a couple of good ones there. Jessica Shaw and Tony Booty. Booty's a good man, but they're the only ones I've heard of doing anything for their constituents in their local electorates. There probably are others, but those two in particular. But as a generalisation, the Labor government is unrepresentative and doesn't speak on behalf of the people that they should be speaking on, and that's at the government level, you know, the cabinet level as well. So you need to vote them out. You need to get anyone in there, but you know, like Liberal will be fine, Nationals will be fine, but you need to go beyond that as well and get more independents. Maybe a centrist party that I was talking about before.
Yeah.
And you know, bring back some sort of a democracy, because it's just a joke at the moment. I mean, I'm not saying that we're, you know, we're not, you know, Stalinist Russia or something. Obviously, we have good lives here.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
if you're analytical, you can see where the edges have been blurred in terms of how people have their voice heard or not heard, and particularly as we've spoken about today, and it just seemed to coincide, sadly, with COVID, that the principle of individual rights and freedoms has just been completely overlooked in every aspect, planning and development, you know, electoral affairs, you know, well, obviously mandates and things like that. But try to achieve anything as an individual, or speak out as an individual in this place, and this goes back to my legal time, and now from what I've seen in the Parliament, and you get nowhere because, you know, you just shut down, and that's a concern, and we need to get more sophisticated. We need to be more vigilant, more active in the democracy, and use our votes more wisely. Vote entire. You know, vote for independence across the board, or something. You know, try to.
So you recognise that we need to change the model.
It's just not serving anyone. The two-party system is not serving anyone.
Yeah.
The fact that people don't know, but that the people like Roger Cook and pretty much the entire Labor Party MPs have been put there by the unions, not by members of the Labor Party. They haven't had a vote since 2012.
Wow.
That was the federal seat of Tagney, but so they're not representative. They're not elected by their members. They're put there by the union movement, and this is what you get. They don't have to answer to the people, because the people don't pre-select them or pre-select them. The unions do.
And we saw that with, I guess, the Labor, the leadership battle between Amber Jade Sanderson and Roger Cook. Essentially, that was two union factions.
Yeah.
It was,
no, well, they're the same faction. Well, so the United Workers Union, Carolyn Smith, she runs the state basically, but she obviously her union itself was looking for Amber Jade, and they have another union on the left faction, which is AMWU, and they came in behind Roger. So as a broad left, they got Roger up, but if it was just United Workers Union, they would have gone Amber Jade.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, yeah, I don't know which of the two evils you would actually want.
Nothing wrong with obviously unions per se, but there is something wrong with a concentration of power and 100% union control over who becomes our leaders. That's what there's a problem with. There's nothing wrong with the work that unions do in the community. That's fine.
Oh, for sure, and that's to be clear, that's where I'm looking at as well. And it is that centralised struggle for power. If the party itself is not actually having the say, it's getting away from its core origins of really
Well, this is another issue for another day. But with the Electoral Act that we were debating in Parliament yesterday, and trying to bring some democracy into the system, so that people are those because you can't get pre-selected in WA for the Labor Party, for example, if you're not with a union. McGowan and McTiernan were two of the last non-unionised, you might say, or non-aligned people, and there's only a couple left now, like Reece Whitby or someone, but the majority, all of the rest of them are just union orientated, and they answer to the unions for all the policies that they make. They don't actually answer to the people.
And just because I'm just going to sign off, we've been going over an hour and a half there. Again, thank you very much, Ben. It's been great having you in the studios here at Freedom Media WA. You did mention when you're talking about 500 signatories for a new party to come into play. What I do want to say is, based on what was happening yesterday in Parliament, that These are steps that have been put in place essentially by Mark McGowan over the past 18 months to ensure to make it harder for minor parties. And that's something that you're acutely aware of. I won't even go there today because it will confuse people. I mean, this is what I'm talking about. I'm sure the listeners or viewers here can we pencil you in to come back and talk about this?
Are interested in it.
Yeah.
But I generally tend not to talk about it because people just don't want to listen. I'm sure that your viewers would be interested. But I mean, what I'm talking about is basically what was on the front page of the West Australian, that the political party themselves, i.e. in this instance Labor, and to a much lesser extent Liberal because they hardly have anyone, have given themselves 100% pay rise, almost 100% pay rise with this new act. And it's just gobsmacking. It's crazy when you think that they're giving themselves a pay rise, and as Mia Davies said in the lower house, they're effectively legislating themselves and paying themselves more money so that they can basically legislate their way to another term. So this is why we need to be even more vigilant. Yeah, that I think it certainly would be, because there was a lot to unpack yesterday. Ben, again, thank you very, very much for your time, and thank you to those that have commented. As we say at the end of every stream, and certainly in the beginning, that it has been a slow chat and interview. We've covered a lot here. Hopefully you've got some insight for those in Western Australia, that you can go back and watch this and direct yourself easily onto Ben's parliamentary webpage and get in touch with his staff if you have some stories. So, but it can only come about, this truth-telling can only come about if people come forward, and the way that happens is more people need to hear about that. So please, liking the stream is great, but sharing it is really where it's at, because we are fighting the algorithms of big tech, and mainstream media, the West Australian, are not going to tell you about the motion that Ben Dawkins has next week in WA Parliament. Thank you, Terry. I can see your comments. Just a shout out, always a great contributor. And on that note, wherever you are, enjoy the rest of your Friday afternoon. From myself, Clayton, Ali, and Ben Dawkins, thank you very much. No problem.
Brought to you by Freedom Media WA, where journalism should never be a government narrative.